I am so immature. So as usual, I'm going to be covering a lot of topics. We've got a creative play session, 2 animation context sessions, and an animation 101 session. Plus I have to talk about the new Pendulum film which I've been doing. So yeah, really packed episode today. Also, if you can hear something in the background, it's not me, it's my friend who's watching a film very loudly! Anyway, let's start with Animation 101, which is my pendulum. So the purpose of this exercise is basically to show basic momentum and gravity, which is why it's also used in lots of physics classes. Luckily for me, we didn't have to do this task in all 4 different mediums, we just had to choose our favourite and our second favourite. So I chose Stop-Mo and paper, and I failed in paper, and I did pretty well in Stop-Mo. The problem with paper is that you have to painstakingly draw out each individual frame, and then, whatever you photo together, and then you stitch together, and if it looks terrible, you just have to go back and do different frames, and you have to redo it all. But with Stop-Mo, you can just readjust, so if that one shot looked a little bit off, then you can just delete that, readjust it, and then do it again, which is why my stop motion looks a lot smoother than my paper. Annoyingly, I haven't put it on yet, so I will do soon, probably after I upload this video. So if you want to check it out, it'll be on my channel. But the main reason I want to talk about the pendulum today is that after this we were also taught kind of how to do it in Maya, because momentum and things falling and stuff like that, that's what we're going to be doing in the next 2 sessions. Well, this session I've had included, because this week we focused on a basic pendulum model, which you move from one side to the other, and then gravity would push this string of almost like a skeleton arm underneath a disc. Basically, the skeleton arm disc thing moved from side to side, and you had to operate the arm, which had joints, and that would be the pendulum, because it's basic movement, and that's how characters move, hence learning how pendulums work is very useful indeed. However, having not touched Maya in about a week, I basically forgot everything I knew, so I was a bumbling wreck for the entire lesson. But luckily I am going to go through it again, because that's what good tutors do. They go through stuff with you when you don't understand what the hell they're on about. It's also kind of foreboding because next week is Halloween week, and we're going to be operating a spider pendulum, which is very more complex. Very more complex, that's a good word. I should use that more. But yeah, to summarise that little chestnut, basically I did pendulum in my 2 favourite modes. Stop-Mo went very well, paper not so well, because it looked rickety and just not smooth at all, which is what pendulum is meant to be. And also it was really faint, because I need to start using biros or stuff, because I did use a pen, but it just doesn't show up with the lights on, and it looks really faint. So yeah, I'm gonna have to somehow fix that. And then I also need to get better at Maya, because I want to be a jack of all trades, because most of the ideas I have, I'm like, okay, so this is definitely going to be this medium. So I've got a project right now, which is because I have nothing to do in my free time, and that's basically, it's what I decided for it was that it was going to be paper, which is one of the things I work out immediately with any of my ideas, really. Is it going to be a book? Is it going to be a film? Is it going to be an animation? What type of animation? I'm digressing, but the point is, I just want to be better at a lot of different ones, and it's annoying because I want to be good at Toon Boom, because that's like Rick and Morty stuff, and I want to be good at Maya because that's 3D modelling stuff, and I want to be good at paper because that looks cool, and I want to be good at Stop-Mo because it's the only one I actually like doing. So yeah, but basically pendulum, sort of a semi-success. I mean, it would be a complete failure, but thankfully Tom and Giantsbane rescued me. Moving on to creative play. Last time we did digital puppets, which I don't think I've talked about. If I haven't, I apologise. I get really confused with what I have and haven't done. But basically, last week we were meant to do 2 sessions a day, and we did 1 because we couldn't do project mapping. Or was it VR tilt brush? Okay, I can't remember, but we couldn't do the second session because the room that we were going to be in was being used. So we just got to do digital puppets, which was really fun because I got to learn how to use Photoshop a lot better because I haven't really had much experience with it, and so that was fun. And people were operating their characters, and most of them had long hair, so they were doing that. And I added a gibbon on the shoulder of mine and made it bounce around. Anyway, the point is that was really fun, and so this week, because the schedule was slightly messed up because we didn't do the second session, we had sort of a triple whammy, which didn't really work out very well, which was we had Tinkercad models in the morning, and then we had projection mapping in the afternoon, and then if you had time, you went into the makerspace and did tilt brush, which is basically painting in VR, which is really cool. But I didn't get to do any of that, so whoopee. So Tinkercad is basically 3D design for babies, because one of the first things Kevin, our tutor, said to us was that he taught 8-year-olds how to use it. Anyway, that was actually really fun because it's something I can do, which is a new concept. So Tinkercad is basically taking existing shapes, which can be 3D, and like cones and cubes and spheres and stuff, and basically you can merge them and you can put them on top of each other and stack them, and basically you can make models. And our task was to just introduce ourselves to it and then make a robot, and I made a bear Terminator robot because I don't know really, but yeah, it was actually really fun because it's not really complex, but it does take some sort of skill to make something decent, because, you know, when you say, oh, make a robot, you can just put some cubes together and then ta-da, but I wanted to go that bit further, which is why I handed it in a little bit later than I probably should have, unless the hand-in is for next week, in which case I'm early. But yeah, I'm really pleased with the result. If I manage to get an image, I'll put it in somewhere. So, yeah. But, yeah, overall, I liked that session. It was actually pretty enjoyable. I definitely learned how to use it. And the best part about it is it's free, so I can basically use it whenever. But yeah, that was Tinkercad. So the second half of the day, or rather the next hour after lunch, was project mapping, which looks... well, it sounds, anyway, like it's really cool, and to an extent it is, but it wasn't really what I imagined, because when I thought of projection mapping, I swear I'm telling the truth, I honestly thought that they project a map onto the floor, and then we'd like walk around on it and go, yay, it's a map. Actually, projection mapping is, well, it's an art form, but it's also a useful tool if you're doing a presentation. Because it basically involves putting a number of different projections onto a surface. There was one clip that we were showed where someone had got a stairwell which had 3 blank sides, and then someone projected just some lines wiggling and moving and shapes bursting onto it. Just black and white lines wiggling around, but it looked so cool. So that was really fun to do. But what we basically were focusing on was projecting different films onto basic shapes that had been, like, models that had been put on a table, and so that they matched the surface area, because that's what you have to get right, otherwise it's just going to overlap into from one side to the other. So say you had a cube, which is pretty basic because we were dealing with a little bit different shapes, but so you could have one projection on one side of the cube and then a completely different thing on the other side, which is really cool. So yeah, it was a little bit different to what I was expecting, but it was still very interesting. And finally, for animation context, yeah, we had some pretty inspiring stuff. So for our previous session, so not the one I've just had, but the one before that, We first looked at the Praxenoscope, which was an invention by Charles Emile Reynaud. I think I got that the right way around. And basically he created the first stop motion camera, essentially, because he created this massive device with loads of mirrors, and basically he got different characters and then managed to project them onto different backgrounds. So the background would remain the same, but the characters would move, which was, I mean, it looked terrible by today's standards, but you know, back then in the time period that he was creating them in, this was revolutionary stuff. And so you sort of had to put yourself in that mindset, but once you did, it still looked really cool. And after we looked at this legend, we swiftly moved on to another one, namely George Méliès. And this particular film was revolutionary because he essentially created stop motion, as in the proper stop motion, not the zoetrope or the Praxenoscope or anything like that, proper stop motion films. And that was through Journey to the Moon, which was at the time completely revolutionary. It stunned audiences. The basic synopsis is that there's a group of wizards and they want to go to the moon, so they get a massive gun and they fire themselves in a bullet to the moon, and then they find a bunch of creatures who can apparently be killed the same way creepers can, with umbrellas, and basically you hit them and then they explode, and then basically they come back and they're heralded as heroes and yada yada yada. But the actual film, for the time, and I'm going to be using the phrase for the time a lot, because we don't really consider animation much of a thing. I mean, if you look at the new Spider-Man animation film, that's the standard, really, because that is so detailed and amazing. But if you, I mean, look back at George Méliès, he created stop motion and yet it looks so bad, I mean, to our standards. But the point is, if you put your mind in the mindset of that period where animation films weren't even a thing. I mean, animation, probably the word didn't even exist. It was just films with weird drawings, probably. But just to watch a film that essentially created stop motion, which is the medium that I like the most, was actually really inspiring. And I actually watched, I knew about the bullet landing in the moon because that shot is stop motion, and it's the most memorable part of the film. And I actually remember being taught about it in school. I think because I drew it because I thought it looked weird, and I originally thought it was like an oil can or something, but I didn't really pay attention. And then I saw it again in the 19 Oscars montage, which is another inspiring video if you want to check it out. But and I'm really digressing this episode. Why am I doing that? The point is, it was really inspiring to look back at something that seems so pathetic. Well, that's not really the right word. I mean, amateurish. That's better. So, to look at something that the quality is basically terrible, but back then it wasn't. And to watch something that created basically animation films, is the reason that we have animation films, was pretty awesome. I know I'm rambling, but basically it was good to finally see a film which I'd seen glimpses of but never really sat down and watched. And whilst it isn't really the proper standard of what we might consider, it is definitely something worth watching. Anyway, moving on to the second animation context session. That was actually more stop motion. It was a mainly paper-based though, because we started off with watching basically the first 50 minutes of Lilo and Stitch. Well, I only watched the first, 10 minutes of it, because I got there late. But then we watched Gertie the Dinosaur, who has one of the best catchphrases of all time. Basically, Gertie the Dinosaur was a paper animation designer created by Winsor McKay, who was an extraordinary artist who could draw stuff really fast. And he made Gertie the Dinosaur, just a paper drawing, move and animate. And it was pretty basic animation, and definitely looped, but it was still revolutionary because he was showing it off at dinner parties with all the rich people, and he obviously enraptured them because it was revolutionary. But that's not exactly the reason we like the film. The reason we like the film in particular is because it gave us, the animation students, our motto, which is, how many just, get my reading glasses. Okay, so our new motto is, don't cry, here, catch this pumpkin. That's what it says, which is just about the best thing that I've ever heard. So yeah, it was educational but also funny because just that phrase was worth the entire session. But yeah, so overall this week I'd say I've had a pretty good week. I now know that Maya is tedious and horrible, but I still want to learn more about it. I've learned that I can't do pendulums, which means that on Monday I'm going to have a very interesting session with Johnny. I've learned about Gertie the Dinosaur. I've got a new motto, which I've already used, by the way. I was comforting one of my friends and I said, don't cry, here, catch this pumpkin. Yeah, we had a very confusing conversation after that. But yeah, and the animation contexts are always fun because they're just watching films and usually they're funny animations, so that was cool. And then I learned how to do projection mapping and Tinkercad, which were both useful and fun. So yeah, until next time.